Welcome back. Fox News obtaining an internal Border Patrol memo which instructs agents in the San Diego sector to release single adults from all but 6 countries in the Eastern Hemisphere and classify them as, quote, hard or very hard to remove. The 6 countries include Uzbekistan, Russia, Tajikistan, Georgia, Moldova, and Kyrgyzstan, and they are deemed, quote, mandatory referral. Meanwhile, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is defending President Biden's executive order on the border to limit daily migrant encounters to 2,500, but he couldn't confirm if the level will be seen before Election Day. Iowa Senator Joni Ernst exposing the president's border order as, quote, a political cover. Watch.
It has taken 10 million illegal border crossings for President Biden to step up and acknowledge that there is a crisis at the border. You don't have to be that intelligent to see what's going on. We have an election just a few months away. And this is the #1 issue across the United States. Oh, let's do an executive order on the border. But, you know, let's make it so it really doesn't do a darn thing. It just helps us get through to November.
Iowa Senator Joni Ernst joins me right now. She's the ranking member of the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee and the member of the Senate Armed Services and Agricultural Committee. Senator, thanks very much for being here. Yeah. You know, you make a good point in terms of what this is about because there are so many carve-outs. And one thing that I've focused on is the carve-out for unaccompanied children. I mean, what we've seen is this complete dereliction of duty when it comes to children at the border because these dangerous cartels are, quote unquote, renting kids or just stealing kids, making believe they're part of family units and then going back and doing it again and again and again with the same kids. And now we see that as part of this order, unaccompanied children are not part of it.
Right, Maria. And what we see with this executive action by President Biden is a whole bunch of absolutely nothing. Because bottom line, for it to work, you actually have to enforce it. And so while he can talk about it now and say, oh, look at me, I've done this order on the border, we will see no results. It is political cover, and the American people see it for what it is. It's just to get him through the election. It's to help the Democrats get through the election. But bottom line, it will do nothing because, one, it's very lacking in substance, and two, he likely won't enforce it.
Well, I mean, look, there's that, and then there's China and this feckless response to China. U.S. officials say that the G7 nations plan to warn small Chinese banks at this week's summit in Italy to stop assisting Russia in evading Western sanctions. I spoke with your colleague, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures on how the U.S. continues to empower China on our own turf. Watch this.
We're actively empowering them. When we talk about our energy policy here, we are sitting on a mountain of the most valuable resource in the world, natural gas and petroleum. But the Biden administration is making it harder and harder to get out of the ground. So what does that do? That empowers communist China. That empowers people who want to manufacture outside of the United States. It harms American workers, and it gets us in a position, Maria, where, God forbid, if we fought a war with the communist Chinese tomorrow, they would make a lot of the critical weapon systems that we actually need for the defense of our own country.
Well, this is very disturbing, Senator, particularly given that now we know that Communist China is recruiting Western former fighter pilots to work in China's air combat. And we've seen really no response from this administration to any of the bad behavior from Communist China. Why not?
Well, that's a good question, and you would have to ask this administration. And frankly, Maria, they couldn't come up with an answer for you. So we see this, and JD is right. We see this everywhere around us, whether it's the energy sector and critical minerals, which, wow, we can hardly refine in the United States. We can't refine in the United States. We can hardly mine in the United States. We send all of that where? To China. And all of those critical minerals, of course, go into vehicles. They go into our weapon systems. So that's one issue. But as far as sanctions, we have seen this from this administration before. We have sanctions in place, and yet there are all kinds of loopholes and ways around them. And again, it comes back to the enforcement issue, they refuse to enforce the sanctions. We see this with Iran as well, not just China. It's all of our adversaries. This administration refuses to step up and do the hard work to really disembowel our adversaries. They just simply won't do it.
What do you make of what's going on in Europe right now? Over the weekend, these parliamentary elections, Senator, European voters handed gains to conservatives in many countries, and we're seeing the immigration issue become as important there as what we're talking about every day here in the U.S.
It is a reflection of what we feel here as well. The left has gone way too far, and when you push the people too far, they're going to go the other direction. Yeah. Common sense is finally prevailing. We have to get our own country under control.
Well, meanwhile, we don't know if President Biden knows exactly what's going on. He made another gaffe this weekend, referring to Ukraine as Iraq. He was referencing funding while in France yesterday, but that's not the first time he's made this mix-up. Watch this.
I think there's a new rise and a sense of some within the country wanting to let that slip. The idea that we become semi-isolationists now, which some are talking about, I mean, the idea we had to wait all those months just to get the money for Iraq.
It's hard to tell, but he's clearly losing the war in Iraq.
He's talking about Iraq all the time, Senator. What is your take on this? Meanwhile, the New York Times is fact-checking the president on his previous comments about his uncle, claiming that he was a victim of cannibalism after being shot down over New Guinea during World War II. The Times writes this: he was a teenage civil rights activist, a former trucker, the first in his family to go to college, and a nephew of the cannibalism victim. All of these claims stretch the truth or are downright false, but Mr. Biden persists in telling personal tales with rhetorical flourishes and factual liberty when he works a room or an audience, Senator. You were caught on a hot mic last week poking fun at the president, cannibal story. Here's what you said.
One, never trust a man whose uncle was eaten by cannibals.
What is going on with this cannibal story?
Again, a great question. We have heard so many tall tales coming from President Biden, or, you know, the most egregious thing is that some of these are just downright lies. You know, he was raised in a synagogue. Oh, no, he was raised in a black church. Oh, no, he was raised in a Puerto Rican neighborhood. But the most egregious of all of these, Maria, is when he tells the families that have lost their loved ones in war in Iraq or Afghanistan that he lost his son, Beau Biden, in Iraq. No, he didn't. I have heard that many times from our Gold Star families, from them straight to me, that he keeps claiming his son Beau was killed in Iraq. We know that's a lie, and the president knows it's a lie. So whether it is cannibalism of his uncle or whether it is losing his son Beau Biden in Iraq, the man is a liar. Never trust a liar. The American people need to wake up. This man is either not there mentally or he is just going to stretch the truth to
Senator,
fit the audience.
Is he lying or is he losing it? Because the Journal last week wrote, behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping.
Well, both, Maria. I think he was a liar long ago. Now he's just losing it. So put the two together, it equals no thank you, no presidency.
Wow. All right, Senator, we'll be watching all of this, of course, 5 months before the election. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.